Whether by hook or by crook, whether rightly or wrongly, whether through the due process of something invented, the fact remains that we now have the most independent legislature we have ever had since 1999, largely because the leadership of both chambers emerged outside the usual arrangement and preferences of their common party, the APC. However, the norm had been for Senate presidents and House speakers to emerge, if not based on the clear recommendation of the president, at least with his blessings. While some people may prefer the perpetuation of this norm, as far as the concept of checks and balances is concerned, it is better to have an independent legislature than to have one approved by the executive, even if this independence is incidental and not completely the result of patriotism, as some will argue is the fact in the current case. This is to guide against man's primordial sentiment to dominate his fellow man, which is historically established reality. Absolute rulers like monarchs, military dictators, and emperors find it easy to govern their people because it is actually easier to govern where there are no checks and balances. This is why most countries over the world prefer democracy, which is made to thrive in such a way that those who govern are held accountable, either directly by the people or indirectly through elected representatives. At the dawn of her independence, Nigeria had no choice but to adopt the British system of government, anchored on parliamentary power, where the head of parliament was also head of government. However, it was only a matter of time before our diversity demanded that we adopt a presidential system, which is the preferred system for most diverse nations, most notably the United States. Coming after a civil war that tested the foundations of the country, Nigeria's adoption of the presidential system of government in 1979 was not only timely, but very rational. It promised stability and greatness. In this system, which effectively began in Nigeria the day Alhaji Shehu Shagari was sworn in, the president was going to be the most powerful Nigerian, but he had to be told what to do based on laws made by the legislature and interpreted by the judiciary. To make sure the president obeyed the Constitution protected itself from abuse by granting the legislature the powers of impeachment, which they could use to end the president's tenure, even without the consent of voters. Moreover, the legislature also had oversight powers and was required to confirm appointments made by the president and generally protect the people's interests. This presidential system, which worked for over 5 years, was truncated in 1983, then was restored in 1999 and had its first serious internal test during the administration of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, when 3 Senate presidents lost their seats within one legislative session amidst rumors of executive meddling. The House of Representatives fared only slightly better. Without excusing OBJ's antics, the fact is that every leader would prefer to govern without checks. Even presidents of the United States have had disagreements with their legislative arms that sometimes degenerate into open confrontation. Usually, it is the judiciary that intervenes to settle such quarrels. This dynamic manifestation of the principle of checks and balances was amply demonstrated in 1983 when the executive branch of the United States government, represented by the Justice Department, received a serious challenge from the House of Representatives for suspending the Aliens Deportation Act. When the matter came to the Supreme Court, it ruled the House of Representatives out of order and upheld a decision of the executive. Interestingly, without checks and balances, the so-called doctrine of separation of powers is absolutely meaningless. Even here in Nigeria, President Jonathan blocked an amendment of the 1999 Constitution which sought to make presidential assent of constitutional amendments unnecessary. the Supreme Court came into the fray and declared support for the executive, ending the most serious executive-legislative disagreement of that administration. As far as administrations go, the consensus is that since 1999, it is the Yar'Adua administration that has had the most cordial relationship with the legislature. History proves that the outcome of an executive-legislature fracas is unpredictable. Globally, there have been 6 failed impeachment attempts in Russia, Paraguay, Madagascar, South Korea, and also in the United States, where both Bill Clinton and Andrew Jackson barely escaped being fired by the legislature. Unfortunately, there have been 7 successful impeachments of world leaders over the years. In Brazil, Lithuania, Indonesia, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, and recently South Korea. On their part, presidents have routinely vetoed the legislature, and President Barack Obama, for example, is said to have vetoed 12 bills with only 1 overridden by Congress. Nigeria has also seen a spectacular demonstration of checks and balances between the executive and the legislature. Just recently, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, as acting president, vetoed 4 bills passed by the National Assembly. The National Assembly also initially blocked a request for an international loan submitted by the presidency. Last year, President Buhari refused to assent to the initial version of the 2016 budget. More than a decade ago, President Obasanjo vetoed a bill on salaries of political office holders. That same year, the legislature overwhelmingly overrode Obasanjo's veto on the 2002 electoral bill. The list goes on and on. While we hope that the current situation will be resolved, as true Nigerians, we must exercise our right to free speech and continue to have our say. Hello viewers, I'm Shola Eji and welcome to the summit. In today's episode, we will actually be discussing the checks and balances within the presidential system of government. Welcome to the show is Senator Ita Inang. You forgive me. Senator Ita, Senior Special Assistant on National Assembly Matters, so both Senate and the House of Rep. Also with us is a former member, House of Representatives representing Ekiti North 1, Honorable Bimbo Daramola. Also with us is Barrister Uchenna Uche. And with me is my brother from the press in the person of the group editor, Mr. Hamza Idris from the Daily Trust. Sorry?
Group Politics Editor.
Group Politics Editor.
Yeah.
You all have all those fancy titles. Obviously, the intention of this particular episode is to clear up a lot of myth about what goes on in the presidential system, especially as it relates to today. So we're going to say part of it is partly educational, and the other is to clear up some of what is perceived right now as existing conflict between the various arms of government. I think when we were having our discussions earlier, Senator Inang did say that he doesn't think, he said, no, you asked, what is the conflict? Yeah. What is the conflict? You are the pressman. What is the conflict?
Many conflicts, not just one.
Okay.
Because basically we can't have check and balancing if we don't really understand the separation of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And right at the onset, I want to limit it to the 8th Assembly. You know, there was a kind of commotion at the onset of the Assembly. And I think it was an attempt probably by the executive to allow the system to work the way it should. But wittingly or unwittingly, there was serious problem. And that was why we had that protracted problem onward up to a year until just recently. Because while the executive could not even settle, the legislature was also having its own share of problem, leadership tussle and what have you. And then transition in the judiciary was also a serious problem because the former chief judge was, about going out, and then the new one getting in.
Let's slow you down there. Basically, the presidential system of government was not intended for arms of government to be chummy with each other. So one could not have foreseen a situation where the president of the Senate will be going on vacation with President Buhari. So what you're simply saying right now is that there were some constitutional issues at the onset.
Yeah, not constitutional per se. I think it's a kind of understanding, because the Constitution is clear. All these arms of government have their own mandate. So there is no constitutional crisis.
Let's get Senator Enang to come in. You said quite clearly that there probably was no so far.
Yeah.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I believe that there is no conflict in this democracy. I believe that what is happening in this democracy is that each arm of government is doing its own job perfectly well. In the course of it, the public that may not have appreciated the extent of the powers of the legislature consider that it is conflict. I'm sure that most Nigerians of average age are familiar with the executive. They are familiar with the court. They are not familiar with the legislature and what it does. Some people were used to laws being made by the Armed Forces Ruling Council and not the National Assembly. Now, the National Assembly members elected, they come to do their own work. Part of their work is to question the executive on the execution of the laws they have made. Part of their work is to question the executive on the way they have spent their people. Part of their work is, why do you spend the money that I have not approved? Now, the executive, a number of persons in the executive, not just this administration, perhaps in the first administration of Obasanjo, who had just transited
I think we're going to come to that. But
no. Let me land on this.
Right.
Most of them were used to, executive power being vested, the legislative power being vested together in the part of the executive. So it is in the course of trying to exercise their different powers that the public perceive that there is conflict. And I believe that there is no conflict. Each arm of government is simply being active, and each matter that arises where the people think is a conflict is activating one section or the other of the Constitution for the purpose of either setting a precedent or creating some more understanding.
You're a former senator. We have a former House of Rep person in the person of Honorable Daramola. Do you agree that, number one, there's no conflict? Number two, he made a statement which was in a broad stroke, that each arm is similarly doing its job correctly. Am I right?
Yes, and the public now feels that there is conflict in the course of each trying to do his work properly.
Well, my take on this is, I do not honestly find what the parliament is all about.
Yeah.
That's number one. And that has been the major, crisis point. If we understand what the parliament is supposed to do, or more than anything else, if we realize that the heart of democracy resides in the parliament, most likely we would appreciate the parliament and parliamentarians some more. Of course, there will be, it's a matter of semantics. You can call it disagreement, you can call it conflict, you can call it whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is that if you understand, and I'm not going to detour into the judiciary at this point in time, I'm going to talk about the executive and the
legislature. Yeah.
Now, most times, what we've seen in the past 19 years, save for President Buhari's administration, is the fact that people who come to the villa, the executive, the president, and all of that, they come with a mindset, or they've been coming with a mindset like, oh, nobody must question me. That attitude is there. People have personalized institutions. I mean, you've seen situations where people almost declare like the Louis XIV and Le Mort. I am the state. And when you come into government, particularly wielding so much of enormous powers like that, and you find out that everybody's looking up to you for everything, every action, and you find, and you have seen this at different times where people have described guys in the House of Representatives as rascals.
Correct.
When you describe people who have been elected to represent constituencies or senatorial districts as rascals, what are you breeding? It shows a poor understanding of the fact that you're no longer looking at that small boy anymore. You're looking at a man who has been elected to fulfill the obligations and satisfy in this constitution.
Okay, now, you're talking about the rascality.
Yes.
Something happened recently. Yes. Maybe that will bring the whole argument to the fore, where voted down the selection or the nomination of Magu. And the executive is going ahead to say, well, we're going to finish his term. Now, is that executive rascality?
Now let me say this to you.
Okay.
And Nigerians must understand it.
Right.
Do we want a presidential system of government that recognizes, among others, that the role of the legislature is supposed to interrogate? It's there in this book. It's there. You must interrogate everything. In fact, that's your job, among others. That's the core job that you have.
That's why you're paid.
That's what. Now this is the thing.
No other job.
Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. When you personalize the state like that Louis XIV said,
right.
L'État c'est moi. I am the state.
Right, yeah.
You will begin to venture outside of your constitutional circumference as somebody representing the executive. I'll give you a quick example. If the statutes say that you must interrogate the process of, selection of ambassadors and all of that, by all means, you should expect that should be a thoroughly done exercise. Right. Anything short of that, you are falling short of the expectation. Let me tell you this. The heart is one organ that you cannot shoot point blank and remain alive. That's what the legislature is all about. Yeah. If you take a shot at somebody by the head, point blank, he may survive. The Hebrew survived it. But if you shoot a man, point, they drop dead. That's what every salvo that you fire at the parliament, you're killing democracy by the minute.
Honorable Daramola, I would like for the barrister to come in. We have a good example of a presidential system currently globally which is in crisis, and that's in the United States, where I think where President Trump seems to think that he is the state.
Yes.
So, in terms of our own democracy,
Yes.
why has the judiciary been so silent? At what point? Okay, we know that they cannot just jump in and intervene in some of the things going on unless brought to them. Somebody has to go to court before you have a judge, right? Yeah.
Well, I must first of all state I'm not a politician, and I don't think I intend to become one now. Be that as it may, I want to categorically state that with due respect to the senator, who is also my learned there is conflict. There is conflict in this country as it relates to what is happening in the country now. Now, let me take it from the constitutional point of view. Now, our constitution makes express provision relating to the powers of the executive, the powers of the and that of the judiciary. Now, these are primary knowledge that all of us have. Now, the conflict, when the government in power came in. Now, it's like a situation of who is going to be the guinea pig in the contest. Who can we really bend first, so to say? And then they found that in the judiciary. When the DSS now did their Gestapo style and then arrested some of the justices up to the Supreme Court, I had a cause to say one thing. Now, we are creating a monster. And what is that monster? We are building a stronger individuals instead of building stronger institutions. Now, there are procedures that ordinarily ought to have been followed so that this separation of power would be just how the Constitution puts them.
But let me stop you there for a second.
Yes.
What you're saying,
Yes.
clearly,
Yes.
is how the Constitution is supposed to be interpreted.
Yes.
There are Nigerians who are going to say to you that we have waited long enough to see some action.
Yes.
It's no surprise that you will hear from all quarters that many of our legislators,
Yes.
or even governors, etc., paid some judge to be able to get into office.
That's allegations.
They are.
Proved. And sorry, let me cut in. And this is where the issue is. Now, when allegations are made, instead of following the due process to find out whether these things actually are true or not, we went to the press. The executive goes to the press, condemn these persons on the altar of the press. And then instead of assigning this duty to the judiciary that ought to have done that. Now, what has that led us to? The situation that we found ourselves into. So what I'm saying in essence is, now, if the executive discovers the judiciary or some officers in the judicial arm are corrupt, in quote, what should they have done? There are constitutional provisions for that.
Well, let's hold that thought. We'll come back to you immediately after this break. Welcome back to the summit. We are definitely examining all the checks and balances that have to do with the presidential system of government. And in fact, it looks like the discussion gets even more heated when we're on break. Now, let's get back. You did say you disagree.
Yeah.
Tell us why you disagree.
You see, the presidential system in the first place, we borrowed it. But instead of us to domesticate it according to our culture, according to our traditions, according to our economy, according to our political understanding, we refuse to domesticate it, and we refuse to actually take it the way it is. We borrowed it from the US, but we refuse to practice it the way it's been practiced in the United States, especially in terms of even selecting who goes to the House of Representatives, who goes to the Senate, who goes to the House of Assembly. All these are serious problems.
How?
They are, indeed, because some people don't even have the knowledge of what it means to be in the National Assembly.
So there's a problem of
Selection process?
well, there's a selection
problem of
process.
Selection process, even compensation process, because once people send their representatives to Abuja, the expectation is that you will go and build castle for the people. Instead of educating the people that, look, my responsibility is to make laws, is to do an oversight over the executive, is to make sure that the budget is fully implemented. We don't have this.
So what you're saying is there's, an educational debt in the lacuna, in the rudiments of the legislative process.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Exactly. Apart from mutual suspicion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, there is mutual suspicion between the executive and the judiciary. That's why we refuse to get
legislature.
It right. And the even the judiciary. In fact, the three serious mutual suspicion.
Yeah. You did say earlier that one part of the government is superior to other, or is a boss, really, or can be like for example.
To the other.
No, okay, let's remove the superiority. Maybe that's not a proper adjective.
Yeah.
But in terms of who serves whom, you were saying, Honorable Daramola, that who is the boss here when it comes to either the legislative process or who can take whom out of office?
Well, I mean, again, in terms of, you know, there's the spirit of the Constitution and there's the letter. And the spirit makes alive, the letter kill it. Okay? If the Constitution says you can oversight me, whatever I do, Section 88, 2A says that I can question you. It's almost an open-ended thing. Superiors only question subordinates. Subordinates don't question superiors. That we know that. However, it is not intended to be seen in that matrix. We're supposed, all the arms of government are supposed to work together, have an amity, because all of them have a purpose to justice delivers on expectations. That's why we prefer democracy over militarism. However, in the practice of this so-called democracy, we realize that a whole lot of people would like to interpret the manner that suits them.
Personally.
Yes. The interpretation of the Constitution. They give face value, they read the letters, not internalize the spirit of the Constitution.
Okay.
If you internalize this, there will be mutual respect and not mutual suspicion. There's no need for mutual suspicion. You have voted for me to go to the parliament, to live by the tenets of the Constitution as enshrined here. So, I'll give you an example. A committee of the House, of the Senate, invites a minister, and the minister says, I can't come.
Well, we're in fact going to take that one up because I've been asked that question by boy, 12 years of age. He was reading. He said, but why is this minister not going?
Yes.
All right? We're educating them in terms of our presidential system. Why should that member not be responsive to the legislature?
Sorry, let me just tell you something that happened. A committee of the House, one minister recently. No, not even a minister. Some head of a parastatal for God's sake. And the woman was inside the office, locked members outside. What do you think is playing in her head at that time?
I have the joker.
That who are these people?
But
another said.
I don't want that to escape.
Yeah.
You have a recourse for something like that.
Yes, it happened.
So no, what is the recourse?
Okay, well the recourse is to go back to the House. Really look. Okay, fine. If you try to sanction, then this conflict that we're talking now the conflict that we're talking about. I was on the committee that eventually mobbed up the crisis about Miss Aruma Ote. Okay. When the first probe was going on, it got messed up a little bit, and we were brought in to clear the mess. But the truth of the matter is that at the 7th House, we stopped resources and appropriation to SEC. But guess what? SEC ran. That woman ran up.
And he's still playing himself right now.
So now you represent, even though they say once a senator, always a senator. You used to be in the
reps as well.
So you will always be there. Yeah. Now you represent the executive. So you know how all these things play out. What should they do in the case of all these invited executive members who fail to show up?
Good.
I know they can be subpoenaed.
Yeah. Let me before I answer the question, I have been in the National Assembly straight years. I was in the House of Representatives for 12 years and then moved straight to the Senate from 1999 to 2015. So I thank God for the grace. Now, before I get to the question, I'll still get to it. The public need to consciously accept the legislature as an arm of government.
Absolutely.
Because I used to say, and it still does appear that the public still takes the legislature as the opposition party. they still take the legislature as persons who have no business in government. They still take the legislature as persons who are strangers to processes. I'm sorry, but if I don't tell the truth, I will have problem. People thinking that what the legislature does is attacking the executive. They will not appreciate that the legislature is doing its own work to check the executive, and the executive is doing its own work to make sure that the legislature does not exceed its bounds. Coming to the question of how do you, if they invite you, why don't you go? First, there has been judgments, and I think I've had opportunity in two or three occasions to give lectures on conditions that you can invite a senator. I mean, you can invite a minister or a member of the public. You cannot just invite him for anything. He says you must invite him for the purpose of either answer questions to enable for the purpose of enabling you to make laws, or to appropriation or any purpose. You must make sure that 1, for inviting him, it is for the purpose of making laws. 2, to answer question power. 3, to answer question relating to the performance of the functions of his office. Then also, before you can invite him, you cannot just invite him as chairman of a committee. You see the minister to come to your house and meet you, or to come to the National Assembly and meet you. If it's a matter of public hearing, you must seek the resolution of the House, so that, and that resolution before you invite him. Now, but all ministers, all heads of parastatals, so long as you hold government office and you hold a trust of the people, when you are invited by the legislature, you do not see a young man that is inviting you. You do not see the size, the height of that, or the age of that person. You see that office. You see that he is sworn in to protect the funds of the government. You go. And you go just because you are in office. If you were in your house at home, the legislature wouldn't invite you. And of course, I want to say that that has not happened under the Buhari. It has not happened. I'm sure there is no minister or no committee of the legislature under this administration who can say that who can say that they've been invited and they don't go. There was a time of a circular that was issued by the Secretary Government of the Federation. And the circular was simply this: honorable ministers, heads of parastatals, if you are invited by the legislature, relate with the office of the Senior Special Assistant to the Matter Senate or House for the purpose of liaising with you to know whether you are invited as a person or with your ministers, and to coordinate and make sure that you, together with your minister, presentation representing the view of the executive, to answer the question that the legislature will ask correctly. You know, so that has not happened under this administration. But in conclusion on this matter, I want to plead that the speaker had to say some time ago, Speaker Dogara said that the legislature should not struggle to have for a popularity contest, because the public has not yet fully accepted the legislature. Not that they have not accepted, they are yet to fully appreciate their functions. So we should. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So I think, look, without a doubt, there is a, what do you call? Well, you said it earlier, the lacuna.
Yeah,
which
the
is,
lacuna.
There's an educational problem in this particular setup
for the people.
Well, for the people,
the guys themselves. I mean, do these guys really understand what the parliament is supposed to do?
Yes,
exactly.
You know, if
you are vying for an office,
and it's not about the president alone, it's even worse. It's even worse. It's even worse at the state. We've seen governors, we've seen presidents come and go in this country. They do not have regard for the parliament. It's not about educating the populace alone. The guys sitting in the villa, and I'm not saying President Buhari. I'm saying that, I mean, we've seen presidents who have, I mean,
but
at some point, okay, 7th Assembly,
yes,
Speaker Tambua was locked out of the parliament. We were locked out.
We remember
and there's a different system.
We remember that very
I'm
clearly.
not talking about
but hold on. Isn't it possible that former military dictators who now head Nigeria, or who at some point become Nigerian presidents, that things are a little different in terms of how the executive functions?
No, they are bound by the Constitution, and they swore to obey the provisions of the Constitution. And when you are elected not to be president or chairman of the Armed Forces Ruling Council, the president of the country. Elected president, whether former military or not, so to obey,
No,
and
what I'm saying,
they don't. It is sometimes the ministers, and the heads of parastatals.
Are you saying during your Obasanjo's and of course, which is markedly different from Goodluck Jonathan's and also currently Buhari, are you not seeing that things are a lot different in terms of how the executive carry, at least between Obasanjo and Buhari?
Let me say something. Let me give.
I think I would want them to answer
Let me
that
give-
because they are outside. If I answer, but I will still answer because
let me give some
I'll
credit
give a
to-
difference because I was involved in all.
Let me give credit administration.
Thank you very much.
One, appointing a super ranking senator as the liaison between the executive and the parliament. And also my colleague at last house, Honorable Kawu, the mindset of a man who wants to respect that arm of government. But when you have a president, and I was going to say, I was tempted to say, oh, vestiges of military government, but that's not the truth. President Jonathan locked down of the parliament, particularly Speaker Tambuwal. I was there. And we had to scale the fence to get into the parliament to do our job. What was happening in his head? A bloody commissioner of police in Abuja.
So much to cover here, guys.
But
There's so much to cover here.
We are looking at this issue as if it's all about executive
And legislature.
No. Now, if we are talking of the mindset of the, we should also cast our mind to the judiciary. Many a times, orders of the court has been served from a court of competence, served on the executive to obey that court order. What do we have?
Yeah.
So part of the issue.
Exactly.
So
Again,
but,
mindset.
But again, like you said, how is that? Let's discuss it openly. How is that resolved? If it is served on the executive and he doesn't show up,
Like in which case?
What-
Because
what-
I'm
what
involved in all.
recourse-
Like in which cause?
is he locked up? I mean, is there? Are we not talking of
I'm not
a
aware of
pseudo
anyone
constitutional
under
crisis
this
here?
government.
May I say something, please, briefly?
Yes.
You see this issue of contempt, because if you are summoned
Absolutely.
by
Yeah.
the National
This,
Assembly,
you don't appear.
it's contemptuous.
Absolutely.
But what are the circumstances surrounding the contempt? Very important. You mentioned the criteria upon which the National Assembly or whatever should summon a member of the executive agency or what have you. You see, when the Senate refused to confirm Magu and President Buhari refused to send another name, what happened? The Senate said they will not confirm resident electoral commissioners until the president obeys their... Is that right?
It is.
How? Where is the provision?
Well, so that is called equal blackmail, isn't it?
That is it.
Let me also say something.
Let me just, on this issue of Magu and confirmation, I just want to say a little thing here. You see, everybody has had a recourse to interpret the Constitution the way it suits him or her. Now, but let's look at the issue. Most times have been, the National Assembly doesn't have the right to convene or not. Now, if there is any institution in Nigeria now that has absolute power to arrest even you as you are sitting here, is the EFCC. Now, who appoints the chairman? Is the president.
With a quick break, we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is such a hot topic that it looks like we will have to revisit it again. We're talking about balances in terms of the presidential system. If we have to look at clearly what is going on in America today, what lessons do you say we can draw from the recklessness of President Trump? Yes.
Well, again, I wish I had 1 hour to talk about this, but granted a little bit, I think I should be able to say this. I will expect an informed, well-informed citizenry now. to be very active, more active than ever before. I will expect that the civil society will be more active, intensely active. I wish that NLC, NBA, and all of these guys, NMA, and all of that will come together for once to be a part of the process. You don't have to sit in National Assembly to be
Active.
a part of the process.
Yeah.
We have high-wired, high-energy level civil society and then informed citizenry. We most likely will be able to appreciate what the Constitution says. A bad law will have to be obeyed anyway. If it's a bad law, until you repeal it, you have your duty bound. Yes. I will expect that the guys going into the villa from now and henceforth would also take a little bit of tutelage. After getting your certificate of return, like the US, what you should do, even though President Trump didn't do it, is to sit around and say, come, I need to talk to President Reagan, I need to talk to President Clinton, I need to talk to my immediate past, President Obama, and then have them wash you through. You can't come in the roughest form and expect that you're going to hit the ground running from day one. It can't happen. You still have a lot of things that you have to drop at the gate of the villa before you get in there. Listen, the president of this country has enormous powers, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Amen.
Thank you.
Now, like, I want to use this Magu appointment and confirmation to round this capital. Now, if we continue to interpret the Constitution to our own individual taste, we can't get anywhere. Now, like I have said earlier on, now, the EFCC chairman has the most power, so to say, to arrest anybody, even as I'm sitting here talking. Now, if the president appoints the chairman, and some people are saying, no, you don't have powers, you don't have right, the National Assembly cannot confirm him, what are they saying? It simply implies that the president can wake up tomorrow, just pick up somebody that will do his bidding, and then how about to see the wisdom of the drafters of that statute? They were now able to put a balance by saying, oh, Mr. President, appoint. But upon that appointment, allow us to do the confirmation. Now you can see the balance. Yes. So if anybody is saying, oh, by virtue of what, the president has power because it's not in the Constitution to say subject not to that, that means we are subjecting this to our own individual interpretation. And I have always said, it is better to build a stronger institution, to have stronger individuals. Yeah. And that is the problem of the Nigerian state is facing now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Barrister Uchenna and Honorable Damola, we thank you very much. We know that
thank you very much.
We'll be calling on you from time to time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.